So Caspar, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Will. Great to be here.
I always love our conversations. There's so many on so many occasions we've spoken, and I always love learning something new. And what I always love is you've got these great ambitions, these great challenges that you've either taken on and you're about to take on. So for people that aren't familiar with you and maybe haven't read your first book, which is fantastic, I absolutely love it, Where the Magic Happens. Please feel free to share a little bit about sort of who you are and some of the exciting things that you've done in the not too distant past.
All right. So, gosh, what a sort of an act to step into. So I guess, I would say, so I had like a relatively conventional life until the age of 37. I went to college and started working in London, trained as an accountant, and then joined another firm, another accountancy firm, working my way up the corporate ladder. And then in early 30s, went and started my own business because it's like, I'm going to create my own wealth, drive my own ship, as it were. And got to the age of 37. I've been running that business then for about 5 years and hit the wall, basically, in that the business, we're turning over about £500,000, losing money, and working 16, 18-hour days. Didn't see my wife, didn't see my two young kids, and just remember thinking, there's got to be a better way than this. And so that was the point at which my wife and I, we could have done one of two things. We could have done one of three things. We could have carried on as we are and just pretended like everything was fine, which it wasn't. We could have got divorced, or we could have rewritten the story of our future. And that's basically what we did. So age 37, we sat down and said, okay, let's imagine a future that's considerably different to where we are now. And basically we wrote our big, bold goal of the future, which was to again, build the business up, turn around, to sell it. And then 5 years after that, to go and sail around the world with our, what by then was 3 kids. It was a crazy idea because there were many, many reasons that we shouldn't do it. We didn't have the money. Nicola, my wife, couldn't sail. In fact, she'd been on a boat twice. She'd been seasick both times. Didn't have a boat. Lots and lots of good reasons. And basically in that 5 years, we then sort of turned life on its head and became a sort of really effective functioning team between me and my wife, turned the business around. And as I was learning things in the business, I was applying them at home. And as I was learning things at home, I was applying them in business. And so I guess I came to see that, how you do anything is how you do everything, is equally applicable to how we build our teams at work and at home. And that there's a universal set of principles. So we in 2014, we went and sailed around the world for 2 years. And the kids back then were 9, 7, and 2 when we left. And we came back from them in 2016. And since then, I've been spending a lot of time speaking on stages, talking to companies about how they can take on their big, bold goals, how they can build amazing teams. And I guess that kind of links to the second book, which I'm sure we'll talk about, which is all about how do you build high-performance teams in this day and age, because things have clearly changed and evolved as the world has gone on. So, as a brief start of a 10, that's sort of a bit of the background.
So I've got to slow this down because I know I threw you right in the deep end there because I wanted to make sure that people really understood this. But you've just skimmed through it as if it was I just sort of did some stuff and then now here I am now. But this is huge. So you had a company with staff, with a team that was losing money. So the stresses and strains of that, plus then obviously the financial obligations to the family and making sure as a sort of one of the, if not the breadwinner for the family of delivering in that side of things. And then in 5 years, you turned it around, sold the business. And there's quite a funny story as to how you actually came about selling the business as well, right?
There is.
In terms of the time that happened and the moment that happened, which we can touch on. But that came about because you set, and I love the term, a big, bold goal for the future. And that was bold for you at that point was because all of the logical reasons as to why you would achieve that goal weren't in place. You didn't have a boat. You didn't know how to sail. Well, you knew how to sail, but your wife sort of didn't, at least didn't like being on a boat. Obviously you had young children, the business wasn't in the position. So it wasn't like you waited for all the stars to align and everything to be perfect before you set out embarking on that mission. Yet you still went and achieved it.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly that. And, Yeah, I mean, there were so many reasons that we shouldn't have done that. I mean, back then, I think I would have earned more money stacking shelves in Tesco's than I would have done running my business. And, the whole, my world was just fraught with arguments and tension, and it was a horrible, horrible place. And yeah, the most important thing was the decision to sit down and to co-create the story of the future, and to rewrite where we were going together as a team. And the same way that you write an effective vision statement for a business is that you pull out the strands and the threads which are common to the people who are actually going to go and make it happen. And you write that story and you put it front and center. And most of the time we always focus on the reasons that we shouldn't do something. Whereas for me, I like to flip it around the other way. And it's like, well, what's the reason that you should do this? And when it comes down to it, you only need one burning reason why you should go and do something. And then you figure out all the answers to, how you go and make that happen. And it's funny, in the new book, I talk about the concept of gifts, not arrows. And when you come up with your big, bold goal, the first thing that happens is your mind starts attacking it and saying, it can't work because of this reason, I haven't got the money, and so on and so on. And the world and its wife start telling you all the reasons why you shouldn't go and do it. And the most logical, the most common thing to do when that happens is to treat those like you're under attack. And then you start arguing back and say, no, it's not like that, and sort of pushing back against yourself and everybody else. My experience is that doesn't really do much good, because all you end up doing is raising the temperature and nobody learns anything. You just get agitated. So we ended up writing down every single reason why we shouldn't go and take on these big, bold goals. And that list, you flip it around and said, well, there you go. That's your to-do list then, isn't it? Those are all the questions you've got to answer. And the problem is that most of us try and answer all those things right off the bat. And someone challenges you, so you haven't thought about this, and it's like, you're right, I haven't. Let's write that down and put that on the list. And then you tackle them one by one. And the whole classic thing, how do you eat an elephant, right? It's in chunks. And so it's viewing all that negative feedback as gifts, that those are things for you to think about, to do your research on, and you come to your own conclusion on those. And basically that's how you attack any big, bold goal, by breaking it down and looking at what's the single most important thing that I can do to move things forward today. And as you get 2 months in, 6 months in, then suddenly you start stacking that stuff up. Actually, you start to realize you're making some pretty good progress. But a lot of the time we talk ourselves out of doing it. And I have to say, I mean, the whole thing actually, with my wife and I doing it, and we spent about 6 months coming up with our shared story, our co-created story. So it wasn't just sort of sit down one weekend and come up with it. We planned it out in great depth, and it got to a place where we were just like so excited by it. It was stuck on the kitchen wall. It was written out in the form of a story. There was a map there so you could see it the whole time. And the more that you anchor the place that you want to get to rather than the place you don't want to get to, the more likely it is you're going to go there. So, in that 5 years, I had plenty of bad days when it's like, this isn't working. And I even remember tearing the map down once in a fit of frustration. It's like, this isn't going anywhere. But then you pick it up the next day, and I remember sticking it back together, and it's like, come on, let's carry on. But you do that because you've built that shared commitment, that shared story with someone else to go and do that. So yeah, piece by piece, you go and tackle it. But it's the teamwork that sits at the heart of that, which is creating that story together and just using the right lens of thinking about those negative voices.
So I think this is so prevalent for obviously personal relationships, in terms of what's our common goal, what are we both driving towards, rather than sort of one person trying to live in the other person's life, or the other person living the other person's life, which is where I think a lot of things can go wrong. I heard a fantastic story only a week or so ago with when people try and in relationships and they try and sort of get towards each other's goals, but then what happens is they end up just missing each other and going past. So for people that aren't watching this on YouTube, what I'm doing is you can imagine sort of moving my fingers towards each other to the point they meet in the middle, but then they sort of meet for a while and then they end up sort of missing each other. So you end up with like an X style shape. Whereas if you're both in alignment and you're moving towards a common goal, then you can continue to move towards that goal together and eventually get there, which I think is really, really powerful. So co-creating that goal is really important. How important is co-creating a goal if you're a business owner with your team? You know, because a lot of people might say, well, I'm the business owner. It needs to be my vision and my goal and then sort of the team buy into it. What's your opinion on that side of things?
So the slightly flippant answer, it depends how engaged you want your team to be. And, you know, the exercise I used to go through with all of my team is I would sit down, and we were in a small team, there's only about 15 of us, and I'd ask them all, why are you here? Why are you in the room? Why do you care? What is it about this that interests you? And people, I've come to the conclusion here, people only do things for their reasons and not for your reasons. So I could, and I'll tell you a story about this, how I learned this the hard way. So I remember as we were turning the business around, I read the book Behind the Cloud by Mark Benioff, founder of Salesforce. And he talked about this concept of having a V2 MOM, which stands for a one-page sheet, which has got the vision, the values, the V2, the methods, the obstacles, and the measurement. And it's like, fantastic, I'm going to go and do that. So I created our V2 MOM. And I had on there our vision. We're going to create a £100 million organization, and then went through the rest of the different things. And I printed all these off and I had them laminated, and I did this big thing with all the teams, like, right, this is the vision, this is what we're going to go for, this is what we're going to go and do. And I got it stuck on everybody's desks, and every time a new person joined us, I'd indoctrinate them on the V2 MOM, and this is how we did things. We carried on, and about 6 months down the line, we're sitting around the boardroom table, and I mentioned it, and there was some guy responded, and it's like, oh, I wasn't quite sure what he's saying. So I said, let me just check in. Can anyone tell me what our vision is? And there was that uncomfortable silence around the table that no one really knew what the answer was. And this guy, one of my data analysts, he turned around and said, I think it's something to do with the number. And it was a crushing silence, because it's like, at that point, I realized that 100 million quid meant an awful lot to me, but it meant nothing to anybody else in the team. Everybody was doing things for my reasons. Let's go and do this. And it's just like, man, that was the start of saying, okay, if we are going to truly get the team engaged, and, up until that point, were they engaged? Yes, to a point. They would turn up to the business, and, we paid good salaries, and, we were doing good work, but there wasn't what I would call that deep engagement with the purpose of the organization. And so then over the next 3 months, I sat down with the whole team, because we were a small team, and I asked some really open questions, such as, what's the organization that would make us all feel proud? And my COO came up with a brilliant question, which said, let's come up with who are the dream clients that we would feel really proud to work with. And together, we started to craft the story of the future for the business. And we ended up by saying, so we were in the field of data analytics, of saying, our mission is to become the world's best data treasure hunters. And that was a co-created story that actually meant something to everybody. And we were going to go after these target clients, and this is the type of work that we were going to go and do. That was one of the cornerstones for turning the business around, because it meant that everybody was super, super engaged. And there was no doubt about what we were doing together. So you can have a business where you don't have that, and where it's what I would call, a single leader driven vision. And those clearly do work. But my experience is to get the team where they will go the distance and, really engage and pull out all the stops. Then the more people you engage in as part of that story, the more you link it up to what's important to each and every person, you're going to have a much more powerful team, a much higher performance team, basically. So,
and that's a great place to introduce your new book. So you've just released a new book, Be More Human, Rethinking the Rules of High Performance Teamwork. And I think it's fair to say that great product placement there. So you've just released this book, and it's fair to say you've definitely created a high performance team. I mean, one of the teams that you created, obviously, when you were out literally traveling the world, was with your family, with 3 young children, and without having any children of my own yet. It was 3, right? It was 3 at that point.
Yep.
And obviously, we all know that children are not necessarily the most obedient, and particularly when you're traveling the world on a boat out in the middle of the ocean, that there's definitely going to be a skill to doing it. That's absolutely for sure. And I think teamwork for so many years, even from sort of the 80s, you know, when a lot of these team building days came in and people learned particular structures and processes of how teams work, is very different these days in the 21st century to what it once was a few decades ago. And that's something that you've sort of poured your time, energy, effort into, not only the theory of it, but obviously the practical side of how to get a really high performing team. Because it's not just about having teamwork. I don't believe that it's about having a teamwork. It's about how do we get a team to thrive? How do we get them to the top performance? And having played sport at a relatively high level, I know the importance of a high-performing team. You can have the A players, you can have the superstars, but if they're not pulling together, then it won't work. And I've played on teams where you've got, on paper, a team that should walk a league that don't, because there isn't that buy-in. And I've played on teams where you've got team players that there aren't really any superstars, and we've won leagues and won playoff championships as a result of having that buy-in. So I would love to know from you, because I know you've got a whole array of principles now for building these teams, but what's one of the things in the past that was sort of deemed as a given that you do to create teamwork that nowadays is maybe redundant or has been superseded by something that you think is more important these days?
Yeah, no, thank you. And it's funny. I suspect we'll come back and because I know you play ice hockey at a high level, don't you? And sort of we'll come back and we'll see the parallels. So I think that, you know, one of the things that I see is that so many teams have like what I would call a veneer of like high performance. They're doing all the right things, but it's not quite there. And, you know, one of the first ways I came across this was in 2000. So in the middle of my working career, I was fortunate enough to be selected to take part in a round the world yacht race. So my first time around the world. And
I love the way you say that, just the first time, you know, like I love it because you've done it quite a few times, and that's not, but it's just incredible, absolutely incredible.
So this was it was 12 equally matched yachts and 18 crew on each boat. So the only difference between first place and last place is how well the team works together. And the philosophy that my skipper followed was very much the business philosophy of the day, which is, you know, numbers first. You focus on the numbers and you use people to drive the results. And that started off really well for us. So when we left Southampton, we sailed across to Boston, and we won that leg. We were first place into Boston. And it was this relentless focus on the numbers. And so just imagine that if we're sailing along and you've got 15 knots of wind and you're sailing at an angle of 50 degrees to the wind, our charts told us we should be doing between 7.2 and 7.4 knots. So all we're doing is just literally fixated on the numbers. And so that worked to Boston. We sailed down the coast of the Americas, around Cape Horn. We were the first boat around Cape Horn, and we're doing really well following this strategy. We get to New Zealand, and the cracks are starting to show in the team, because you cannot run a team of people consistently for an extended period of time where it's just about the numbers. And I've got photos from the time, and you look at people's faces, they're just like focused, and there's nothing else other than the numbers. And it works if you're going for a gold medal. It works if you are doing sprints. But if you've got a long-term goal, you cannot sustain that. It came unstuck for us as we were racing around Wellington Harbour, and we ended up crashing the boat. And we took out one of the other boats from the race, and we were basically disqualified. And my skipper's saying a fast team is a happy team. I realized that was 100% the wrong way around. It's actually a happy team is a fast team. How do you get a happy team? You get each person in roles where they feel fulfilled, where they really enjoy what they're doing, where there's a shared common purpose, where there's a shared story. So there's links to a number of the principles in the book. But it's all about putting people first, which is why the book is called Be More Human, because underneath any team, it's just a group of people who perform. And that model was exactly the same way when I came into the working world in the mid-90s. And I worked in a big accountancy firm. And it was just numbers, 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 numbers. And the people were an afterthought. And so one of the big things for me in the rethink in this sort of set of rules is saying you put people first. And you find out what each person is amazing at doing. You get them doing work they love doing. You find out what's their biggest weakness. Where are they most challenged? And okay, you don't get them doing those things, or you find ways to mitigate those weaknesses. But it's a human-centric strategy to building teams. So that's probably the biggest one, knowing that if you put people first, the results will follow, rather than just being relentlessly numbers-driven.
And I couldn't agree more, and that simple question that you asked, why you here to your team those years ago, and identifying that is so true, because everyone's plugged into one radio station. That's We FM, what's in it for me? And yeah, they can buy into the bigger goal, but let's be honest, they want to get something out. So how can we create that win-win? How can the company win and they win? And by making sure that, I think it was it Jim Collins that said sort of get the right people on the bus and then them in the right seats. In your instance, we get the right people on the boat, and then in the right positions. But it's so true. So
that's
yeah.
Funny. So my friend Kevin Gaskell, that I quote in the book, he talks about the concept of be better first, and then bigger will come. And the whole thing was trying to get sort of bigger start away and bigger numbers. No, forget that. Just do something with a team of people that really is really, really good, is really, really world class, and the results will flow out of that.
So let's talk about cornerstones. So there's these 20 principles, and they will all fit in order to ensure that a team operates at high performance. But I'm almost certain there'll be some cornerstones, so some real key ones that if they're not there, then the other ones maybe don't have as much of an impact. So if someone right now is listening to this and they've got a team, whether it's a sports team that they manage or coach, or whether it's a team that they manage, or they own a company and they're looking to get their team to work, what are some of the key things that they really need to make sure that are definitely happening and are definitely in place as part of these rules that you've rewritten to get the optimum performing team? Yeah.
So there's two that jump straight out for me. So one is about trust, and the other one is about looking at the whole person. The trust one is pretty straightforward, right? A team of people, all it is, it's a group of people who trust each other. If there's no trust, you have no team. It's as simple as that, right? And, I found that when I was on the foredeck and this sort of, in the middle of a sort of a gale in the Southern Ocean, then unless there was that absolute trust between other people, you're not going to go out there if you don't feel your life is safe with those other people. There's literally no team. And I think that, anyone in a team can demonstrate a leadership mindset and build that trust. And it's really simple how you do it, right? you just listen to people, really listen. It happens so rarely. And you play back what you've heard, and then you act upon that information. And the more you do that, the more trust that you build over time. And, the amount of stories that we hear about, trust being eroded in businesses, it's clearly the opposite of that. So for me, that's the bedrock. And, the open questions like, why are you here? Listening to that, helping people achieve their goals. That for me is the foundational level. Then the second level is this concept of looking at the whole person. And has become so much of our language over the past however many decades about talking about work life and home life. And I really rail against that concept, because you don't have a work life and a home life. You've got one life, right? Mm. And we have, it's almost like, I remember when I sort of back in my days working for one of the big four accountancy firms, it's like I put my work head on, go off, and then sort of come home, and then sort of there's all the stuff that comes out, all the tensions and so on. And I think the world has all seen this now with a COVID world, where there's no separation between work life and home life, and they've just literally been crashed together. And for me, the encouragement is to help each person in my team to really thrive, not just at work, but at home as well. Create your home story with whoever is important to you. Build your team at home. Think about the values. So the same concepts we talk about in business, apply those at home as well. There was some research which I touched upon in the book. It was taken, I think it was the start of this year. It was the start of this year. And they surveyed like a number of people, hundreds of people who were earning over 100 grand a year. And over 70% of them were desperately unhappy. And there were some horrible stories in there. People are so focused on the work that they've completely neglected home life. That is not a long-term sustainable approach for having healthy, effective people at work or in life or anything like that. So the more that you can apply those ideas of creating that home story and thinking of yourselves as building the home team as well as the work team, then I think that's a hugely beneficial thing that organizations should be supporting their teams to do, to think of that concept of a work team and create that strength, that unity at home. And someone said to me, I was on an interview the other day, and they said, well, that sounds terrible. That sounds like you're going to go and take a corporate vision statement and a corporate set of values and try and do that at home. And it's like, I promise you, if you try and do that, your family will laugh at you. And what I think is that happens, certainly in my experience, is that the vision statement and the values get washed through the filter of reality, and your family will say, well, that's ridiculous, but actually we can make this story that sounds like this. And once you understand that concept, then you can take those ideas back into the workplace. It's just putting stuff in normal language. So I think that, this whole concept of helping people to build not just the work team, but the home team, and using those skills in both areas, I think that's something that very few organizations do. I think very few people do. And, my own personal experience, it was life-changing. And, the people who've been in our courses, similar stories, right? It liberates an area that people have often never thought about.
I remember there was an exercise that you did when you were out traveling the world with the family, where you did a value exercise with stickers. And that was a way that you engaged the home team, so to speak, and engaged the family. So it wasn't this really corporate thing, because let's face it, in most corporate organizations and even some SMEs, some smaller businesses, values are these words that are stuck in a frame on a wall that you walk past most days. But you had I'm going to talk about the stickers, but then you had a way of doing it with your own team with chocolate, if I remember correctly. That's as well.
Exactly. Well, very well remembered. So look, here's the thing, right? I get really on my hobby horse about this one. Most companies completely screw up values, and they go through it as the exercise because we're meant to do this. And they make people cynical. Is it any wonder, right? Because it's just like lip service, and it's just like corporate BS. look, here's the essence of values, right? It's agreeing, how do we work together as a team? What are the principles about how we work together? I remember back in my days in the accountancy firm, there was a big long set of like 10 principles. And, I got to the end of the second one. I couldn't even tell you what the first one was. It was this convoluted like jargon. It was just like, and we'd look at it once a year and it was just like, it was utterly dismissible. When I was turning the business around, someone encouraged me to go and look at values again and they used the logic, which I'm sure you'll have come across, which is, values shape your behaviors shape your actions shape your outcomes. They are the building block of how we do it. So I looked at that and I figured out, how can I do this that's in a fun way, that's in an engaging way? And I brought in an outside consultant to help me do this. And we shaped, there were 3 stages to it. The first stage was breaking down the cynicism about people's previous experiences and then shaping what our 6 values were together. The second thing was then, what do we do when we display these values at our very best? Because language is like such a great simplification of the things that we feel. And so therefore, if you want to get understanding around the word, what courage means, you have to come up with definitions. And then the most important thing is, how do we actually live this day to day? So we did in the business, we did values prizes, hand out bars of chocolate every week and tell people what they were doing well and what we wanted to see more of. And because that worked so well in the workplace, that was when we decided to take that into the home environment as well. And so we created an adapted process of that. And with our young kids, we created our values, and we created, so exactly the same thing. We created the values. We said, what do we do when we live them at our very best? And what's the process for how we actually talk about this every day? So we'd sit around the breakfast table, exactly as he said, and hand out stickers and just turn it into a conversation about the things that we want to see more of. And fundamentally, that's all it was doing. It's enabling a conversation. It's a vehicle for having a conversation about the things that are good and you want to encourage. That's what values are at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, and I think that you definitely you hit the nail on the head when you said about a value. If it's just a word, it's useless. We call them make it happen maxims. So we have the values, and then we have like, what are the behaviors that go with that? How does result? What do you do in order to create results as a value? What do you do to create a great experience? What do you do to create collaboration and provide collaboration? So it's so important. And obviously the reward part as well, right? You created that reward for the kids. It was sticking a sticker. For the team, it was a chocolate bar. It was just something to acknowledge that they've done what it is that's going to move the company forward. And
I mean, the ultimate thing, my brother Max came and joined us in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and he'd read all the blogs that I've been putting out where I mentioned this, and turned up on the boat. It's like, his arms folded. I'm not doing this value stuff. All right, fair enough. I'm not going to force you to do it, so that's fine. Within a week, he would be the first person around the breakfast table, because who doesn't like hearing nice things about what they've done when someone else points them out? Takes the time to notice small details and to share that. Show me a person who doesn't like that. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is, right? It's finding things that are good that you want to encourage more of. So values gets lost in a corporate world because we should be doing it and it's not thought about, I think, in the right way. So one of the things in the book I refer to as my manifesto is do it and do it properly. Don't just do the things that you're meant to do, and bring it to life.
And on that note, you say about who doesn't like to be told nice things. I get a lot of my clients to do their love languages, and it's if you're not familiar with it, you can go online, type in love languages, and you can do it as a singles test or a couples test. And there's 5 love languages. Now I'm testing myself. So there's acts of service, there's receiving gifts, there's words of affirmation, physical touch, and quality time. And so many of those love languages are met when you do that simple exercise. You're telling someone that they're done well. You're spending quality time together. They're receiving a gift. There's so much that's brought into that, which makes people feel loved and feel appreciated and acknowledged. So that's hugely beneficial.
Just adding to that as well, right? The whole science of kindness shows that the person who benefits most when you are kind to someone is the person who is being kind. So therefore, whoever's giving out the values prizes, they're going to benefit the most rather than anyone else. And it's like it's a little understood fact about that, but it's true. I mean, it's the chemistry shows that.
So let's talk about sort of raising the bar. So you've got some of the keystones in place, the fundamentals, building the trust and having those different teams, and understanding that, acknowledging that if you're in a corporate, if you're in a work environment, that people have got their home team and their work team. So if people want to now go, right, well, we really want to raise the bar and we want to sort of have that stellar performance, what are some key things that people can be doing, some almost quick wins, you know? And I know it's sort of sometimes saying quick win can I don't want that to come across in the wrong way, because I understand there's a foundation that gets put in place to enable to really get to the peak levels. But if there were some quick wins, there were some changes, that things people could start doing straight away as a result of listening to this today with their work team or their home team, that could start improving performance, what could they be?
Okay, so I'll give you two answers to that. So the first one will be the most principled one, and then the second one, then some people may take it, some people may leave it, depending on how they feel about it. The fundamental one is learning how to learn. And I reference Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset, as one of the principles. And there's a lovely story, actually. I spoke at a head teachers conference last year. And one of the things that this head realized they had to instill in the whole school was this concept of learning how to learn. So they decided to pick something which nobody had any skills at all, both pupils and teachers. And they decided on circus performances. And they took everybody along there, and the pupils could see the teachers trying something, struggling, failing, going again. How do I go and do this? And it's that struggle, fail, progress sort of loop. And getting people in your team to understand that's the journey of how you go about learning things. Because the indifference where you want to be here and where you want to be here, achieving your big, bold goals, is wrapped up in a set of skills. So how do you develop those skills to move up through there? It's learning, can't be anything else, right? And so really embedding that concept of learning how to learn is fundamental. And family project, we created a big picture about a year ago now, which hangs in our kitchen. And I asked the kids and my wife to come up with as many different ways as we learn. And we created this huge great painting which said, "We are learners." And it's got these different ways on there. And it's just there, it's just sort of permanently influencing ourselves in terms of the fact that, we're all still students, we're learning, and how do we think about going and doing that? So that's the conceptual one, but really embracing that concept of learning skill development. In terms of things that someone can do right now, two of the cornerstone habits which I've found transformational, and I'm sure you'll agree with this. The first one is sleep. If someone was going to prescribe a medicine that is universal and reduces disease and inflammation and everything else, sleep, right? Read Matthew Walker's book, just watch his TED talk for 8 minutes or whatever, why we sleep. And, getting your 8 hours sleep a night, there's so much science which says that's good sense. So that's a must do. The whole thing about I'm surviving on 5 hours sleep warriors and that sort of stuff, science shows it does not work. So sleep. And then the second thing is I'm a massive fan of cold showers. Been doing it now for 18 months. And as well as the medical benefits from that, and there are many of those, the favorite thing that I like is waking up in the morning, having a cold shower. I've already taken on my first task of the day. I've already set my mind up. All right, let's go. What's next? And it's just priming myself for the day. So those two things, start your day off on the right foot by having enough sleep and activating your system ready to go.
And I think that I've got to bring this up because some people will be sitting here right now going, "What? So I've got to go and tell my team to go and have a cold shower and they've got to sleep more." Hold on a minute, they don't want to do this. But the thing that I would say is, like with anything like this, is I think the old Gandhi quote, which is, "Be the change that you want to see in the world." And if all of a sudden people say to me, I hear it a lot. They go, "Will, you've got so much energy. Where'd you get your energy from? Like you do this and this and this and this and blah, blah, blah. Where'd you do it? And I truly put it down to some of those basic things you mentioned, making sure that I know that I operate at my best, typically if I've had 7.5 hours sleep. I know that if I do my morning routine, only this morning I was speaking to, my partner about it and saying that I'm a little bit out of sync. I've been away for a few days. My morning routine's a bit out. I'm not exercising the ways that I would normally do. And I'm noticing the benefits of it. And the same way that you, as you noticed with cold showers, when you start making these tweaks, people see the difference in you. And then they'll say, what are you doing? I want to be more like you. And then you tell them, and then that's when they start doing it.
Absolutely.
They want the result.
None of this stuff, you cannot mandate any of this, because people do things for their own reasons. So the first thing I say, buy the book for your whole team, and lots of teams have been doing that because it talks through why that's a good idea. But yeah, lead by example. It's the best way to do it, right? And it's funny, actually, a friend of mine, he's got all sorts of different medical issues. And on my recommendation, about 6 weeks ago, he started taking cold showers. And I don't know, emphasize this, but he is like, he's someone who's just suddenly is like, he's just there, right? I mean, he's on it and he's making amazing things happen. He's disrupting an industry right now. And I think he's the most creative I've ever known him in 20 years I've known him. So
one of the things that I personally get from cold showers is that, do I wake up every morning and think, yep, I want to have a cold shower? No, I don't. And full disclosure, I don't only have a cold shower. I have a warm shower and then I make it cold. But what that does, even that little part, because I think I don't really want to turn it cold now. I'm quite happy being warm, is that I'm starting my day doing something that my head's telling me I don't want to do, but I do it anyway, as a way of just showing who's in control here. Because we all have those moments in any given day where we think, oh, I need to do that. And then we have the other little voice goes, no, don't worry about it. Do it tomorrow. Do it the next day, whatever. Whereas no, if I say I'm going to do something, we do it. And that's something that I find is beneficial.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny. Yeah, I go straight for the cold, actually. I don't. My wife, she started off with warm and then moved to cold, but she's now stopped doing the cold shower. She decided it's not for her. But anyway, it's each to their own, isn't it? So
hats off to you. So two other things I'm really keen for us to talk about before we go on to talk about your current big bold goal, because having known you for many years now, I know there's always something that's on the horizon, the next challenge that you're taking on, the problem you're looking to solve, which I'm really excited to hear about. So resilience and being resilient. I mean, resilience is a word that's certainly been used a lot more, I found, in recent years, and people having to become more resilient. So how do we deal with things when they, as a team, when they don't go to plan? It's all well and good talking about having the big bold goal and having the values and doing things and having the plan and working towards it. But how do you deal with inspiring a team or being a leader of a team when things aren't going to plan?
Yeah. So again, as with all these things, there's two answers to that. The first answer is that the resilience gets built brick by brick over time by doing all these things well that we're talking about, building the trust, co-creating the story, making sure that everybody is thriving at work and at home, having the values. By doing those things, you build an engaged, cohesive team. An engaged, cohesive team is far more likely to deal with anything that you've had thrown at you than a team that's dysfunctional, where there's no trust and so on. So having strong foundations is super, super important, because resilience isn't created in the moment. We had a couple of scary situations on our on all the sailing trips I've done, had a few scary situations. And, the resilience isn't created there. The resilience for us was created in our 5 years preparation of trying, failing, learning, trying again, and working together as a team. So all the things that we've been talking about so far, doing those consistently over time is what will be the strongest way to be able to deal with things. Now, whether you've done that or whether you haven't done that, we're all still going to get stuff thrown at us. So let's just get really practical about how do you deal with stuff when you are there in the moment. And for me, it's important to have an understanding of our psychology and how we respond to things. So, when we had the situation in the middle of the Pacific where we had power failure and we had to figure out what to do, we're 500 miles from the nearest bit of land, and straight away your emotions spike and you go off the charts and you've got this rush of blood to the head. And my experience is in those moments, you generally make poor decisions. They're emotionally driven decisions. So the most important thing is to breathe, to get your emotions under control, and then to sort of think through and have your thinking challenged by other credible people who are around you, saying, how am I going to resolve this? So the final 30% of our brain to develop is our cognitive brain at the front here. The other 70% is our emotional brain, which sits at the back of our head. This is the one that fires off first. This is the one that you want to engage. So once that is engaged, and you can sit down and look at the options with other people. So whether there's businesses out there at the moment are trying to figure out, do we, get rid of our office space? When do we bring people back off furlough? How do I respond to uncertain demand that's going on out there? It's having your thought processes challenged by other credible people. So one of the chapters in the book is all about how do you make better decisions. I ended up in Silicon Valley talking to one of the leading companies that makes decision-making software. And I basically just sort of decoded the process that they use. And it starts by saying, okay, well, what's the outcome that we want here? Remove ego from the situation. Let's have absolute humility. That's probably the biggest barrier to making good decisions, is our egos get in the way. And get different opinions and argue and debate until you reach a consensus on how do we adapt to this. Again, I talk through the whole process of how you do that in the book. But that's what resilience is for me. It's making good decisions when you're under pressure rather than emotionally charged decisions. And so it's emotions under control, and then follow a logical process for how you deal with it.
Love that. And I think it's so true, isn't it? When we really think about it, is that normally the worst decisions we've made are when we're in an emotional state, or like you said, when you're relying on your ego, or your ego's taking too much of a control. And the other thing as well, I suppose, in a lot of instances, is it's when you haven't had that soundboard. I'm a huge fan of surrounding myself with people to challenge me as well as support me, but my peer groups of people that I look up to and I admire and trust and that influence me, as much as they're to support me and give me the support when I need it, I also encourage them to challenge me and call me out when I'm doing something they don't think's an appropriate decision. And how important do you think it is to have that peer group of people around you, positive, driven, like-minded people to support you and challenge you? And how important has that been in your own development, Caspar?
Fundamental, but it can't just be positive, by the way, because there's the thing there that you have to have people who challenge you. And there's a danger that I've found, certainly in a lot of personal development things. You just want people to encourage you, lift you up. And actually, no, you want people who will challenge you. And you have to be emotionally in a strong enough place to have that challenge rather than to get and resist that. A friend of mine, Kevin, said, look, there's 5% genius in all of us. So if we get 20 people, that means we've got 100% genius across all of us, right? And so it's making sure that we really do tap into that. So no one has a monopoly on all the good ideas. And I know that when it's just me in my head, I might do okay. But when I sort of have it challenged by other people, then my likelihood of success goes up dramatically.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And I think that so one of the things that people talk about a lot, and I feel quite strongly about this, is people talk about sort of cutting negative people out of your life, right? Cut away the dead wood and do this. And I personally don't agree with that for sort of similar reasons that you've just mentioned, in that I don't believe, whilst you may perceive it to be negative, I truly believe that everybody's actions are done with a positive intention. Now, granted, that intention you may not be deeming it positive in that moment, but it's coming from a place of positive intention. And albeit maybe sometimes it is just positive for them, not necessarily positive for you, but being able to have that perspective and see things from a different light. I know there's certainly been times when I've acted and I've perceived something to be that's negative and they're trying to bring me down. Well, actually, hold on a minute. Are they just getting me to see something that I'm not seeing myself right now? Is there something that I've not observed that actually, if I take it, if I look at it in the cold light of day, is actually can be there to serve me rather than to hinder me?
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that's something that's often overlooked. And I've certainly, and actually for a number of years, I did subscribe to that thing and just surround yourself by the positive people and don't listen to negative voices. But actually, that's really dangerous because, you need, well, it's the gift, not arrows, right? You need to hear all different things. A very good friend of mine, he runs a team at Johnson & Johnson, the pharmaceutical getting through an idea and we've got it so far, then we need to find the most negative person in the business and get them to kick the holes in it, and they'll find the holes, and it's like good because that's what you want, right? So then you can test the different ideas, and if you don't get that challenge, then there's a likelihood you'll miss something.
And there is in neurolinguistic programming, we talk about meta programs. You've got complex programs and simple meta programs. And one of my complex meta programs is I'm a mismatcher. So if you get 3 coins and you put them down and you say to like £3 coins, for example, and you say to someone, right, what do you see? Some people say, well, I see £3 coins. Some people say, well, I see the color. Some people will say, I see 2 heads and whatever. Whereas I will typically find the one thing that's different to everything else, which for my role as a coach is fantastic because I will typically see things that other people don't see. And that can be helpful sometimes. And sometimes it can feel it's not so helpful. I know that it might. Say again, sorry?
As a parent, my oldest daughter is a mismatcher. If I'll say it's black, she'll say it's white. And that drives me crazy as a parent. So it's like different context is good, but it's like...
Exactly. So no, it's extremely powerful. So one of the things that really stands out for me from having one of the first times that we ever met. So for people that aren't familiar, Caspar and I have both done a TEDx talk. We did it at TEDx Chelmsford back in 2017, I think it was. And I remember hearing a talk, which is fantastic. So by the way, I'm going to plug it for you. Go to the Caspar Craven TEDx talk, or they can type in.
Oh, I don't know. I probably send them to the Tom Billieu interview these days rather than TEDx, but I can't remember what it was on now. I must be lining up for my next TEDx anyway and Be More Human. But anyway, it's
fair enough. Well, and that's another video as well. Definitely worth checking out. So on Impact Theory, Tom Billieu, Caspar Craven, type it on YouTube. Fantastic watch. One of the things that really stood out for me was I came backstage, and it was either before or after we were speaking, and we hadn't known each other very long, minutes we'd known each other. And you asked me a question. Almost every time we ever talk, I bring this up because it was one of those moments that it would stay with me for the rest of my life. And you basically turned around and said to me, look, how can I help you? And it really stood out for me as one of those things of, wow, actually, I didn't know. I wasn't sure how you could help me. But the fact that you asked it and the fact that you got me thinking about it, for me, gave me an indication of the type of person that you are. And I think one of those things that sometimes just reaching out to your team, if you are a leader and you're in a leadership, is saying, look, how can I help you? How can I support? Asking that question and getting them to come to you with a way that they can support you is something that can be extremely powerful too.
I love the fact you bring that up. So thank you for that. I mean, it's interesting. So the thought process behind that, I always find that sort of if people are able to articulate what it is that they need, then they can project that more and they're more likely to get it. But most of the time, we don't actually think about what we need. We're so caught up in like the thing that's going on in our heads. And it's like, it's a common question. So it's, what do you need?
Wonderful. So right now, just before we round up, the big bold goal for Caspar Craven, the Craven family, what's the big bold goal right now? What are you tackling? What's the challenge?
So over the past 3.5 years, I have had the most immense amount of fun going and standing on stages, speaking around the world at different conferences and events, and I hope to continue doing that for a long time. But one of the things that I've really missed is building a business. So I'm now in the early stages, the pre-launch phase of launching my next business. And my mission is to become the global gold standard for teamwork, that's driven through innovation, that's both good for business and changes lives for the better. And my sense is that teamwork development, leadership development inside companies, it's not changed in the last 20, 30 years, and it needs a shake-up. Why does it need a shake-up? Because so many of the principles which underlie it are outdated. The rules need to be ripped up and rewritten, which is basically what this is all about. So,
Sorry, just to interrupt really quickly. So, people that are just listening to this on audio, it's when he said what this is about is it's his book, Be More Human, and you can get it on Amazon. But yeah, sorry to.
No, absolutely. So basically, it's sort of just doing a fundamental rewrite in terms of how do we do this. And I've partnered with a lady who is basically, she has been responsible for building out all Johnson & Johnson's training programs for the last 20 years or so. So I've got someone who's got the real deep expertise in delivering training, but we're taking all the ideas that I've got and delivering that in innovative ways. So that is my next big bold goal, which also happens to be the name of the business, bigboldgoals.com. We're not live yet, but we will be in the next month or so. And our mission is to transform the way that team building happens inside corporates and having a much more human approach to it.
Wonderful. Well, Caspar, thank you so much. I always love our conversations, and as always, full of wisdom and nuggets for people to go away and share. So aside from that website, if people do want to find out more about you, they want to get access to your books, they want to connect with you, where can they find you? Where can they learn more from you?
Yeah, CasparCraven.com, CASPAR Craven.com, and all the usual social channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, and so on and so on. So I've really enjoyed, as always, chatting to you, Will. It's always a lot of fun, and you always ask great questions. So thank you very much for letting me share today.
Absolute pleasure. Once again, thank you. And thank you for those who are listening. Again, reach out to Caspar. Definitely go and get his books, but both the books, Where the Magic Happens and Be More Human, incredible reads, and you'll learn a huge amount from him. So Caspar, thank you very much. For you that's been listening, until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.